Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion with the topic of unreality this morning. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent in Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America, and we welcome you all. We'll start with the morning prayer.
I'm reading from page 63 of Divinity Course in General Collectania, and two prayers there. One, the short one, prayer for yourself, and also the Christian Scientist's prayer. I am the child of God. His care and love surround me. Animal magnetism cannot reach me to make me fear or be afraid. There is no matter and no mortal mind. God is all in all. All is harmony, health, holiness. This is the prayer unceasing, to be used on all occasions and at all times. It lays the axe at the root of unreality, materiality, that forbidden tree, and cuts it down. Preserve a sacred silence on this subject of prayer. Signed by the author of Science and Health, the Key to the Scriptures.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Florence. All right, and the watching point.
Watch number 335. Watch that you include a beaten error in every demonstration. Many recipes call for a beaten egg. When we are demonstrating, let us include the fact that the error is already beaten. Then we will not work to beat the error, but rise to the realization that it is already nothing, and we are beating nothing.
Thank you. Okay, comments.
Well, that was one of the biggest things I had to learn coming here was how to really understand, how to understand that I was never trying to heal something, because with the allness of God, that leaves everything that's unlike God to be unreal or nothing. And that was a big part of my change here, was learning that. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you. Well,
it's quite a positive approach to anything.
right.
Mm-hmm. I read on from Collectania something that Mrs. Maria Newcomb wrote on 1892. She said, Mrs. Eddy is giving them instruction, that is. She said, our work is not to change God's work, for that is finished and perfect. Neither is it to make error nothing, for it is that already. But to stand, apparently in the midst of it, unmoved, knowing its nothingness. And then she gives Isaiah 43:2, which says, when thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. So that was just goes with this, and it's beautiful.
It is. What page was that, Florence?
This is Collectania, page 18.
Thank you. Yes, it goes perfectly with that. And you know, Mrs. Eddy, I think she says it 2 times in prose works about don't be out against the mist. What?
Rise above it.
Simply above it. The mist, remember? Nothing really to do, like beating at a shadow. You rise above it. So very, very important, and a good start to this lesson on reality, because we're talking about nothing. And Mrs. Eddy says that we have to sometimes build it up in order to rip it apart and realize it's nothingness. You know, Mrs. Evans used to talk about that movie, The Wizard of Oz. It seemed like there was some big, huge, horrible thing going on there. And what was it?
Little man behind us.
A little man just kind of making fireworks. So, very important to understand that.
I
I
think
think it's
vital.
Let me just wait 1 second. I have to put you louder a little bit. Okay, go ahead now.
I just wanted to say that it's very vital for us to see that there's this little man behind the screen that we make into a reality. This week, I've been confronted with this over and over again, this idea of what unreality is, and that by unseeing that, one can go forward.
Thank you. Absolutely. That is very good. Just like Karen said, this understanding this major point helps us go forward. Karen said, okay,
No, I was saying that, is the fear, is the fear, you're looking at it and you're so afraid, is the fear that stops us really, because right there to know that but I'm looking at this, but it's so unreal, it's not true. It's just like if I see a mirage, it doesn't mean that there's water there. So it's getting over that to be able to stand and see the unreality of it.
Hello.
thank you. Yes.
This reminds me of something that has blessed me so much to understand about the absolute and the relative, because we need to pray, to think, to see in the absolute, but we need to work with the relative, with what we have right in front of us, because the reality is in the absolute, but we are working all the time and dealing all the time with people that may not be that conscious or know what we know. And it is always so tricky to try to, at least I'm still learning about this, to see them in the absolute, to think about them in the absolute, to pray in the absolute, but make sure that we work with the relative, with what we have right in front of us, or it's a disaster.
Well, it's very important. Yes, this is where Christian scientists have gotten in big trouble, where they make absolute statements that people think they're crazy, like there is no matter, or God is all even. You have to have great wisdom in your dealings, and also in learning it yourself. It's step by step that you come to this understanding. And Mrs. Eddy was able to often work in the total absolute, and we should get to the point where we can too, but that doesn't necessarily mean we talk it. And I know in one instance where someone was quoting the absolute to Mrs. Eddy, and she said something like, well, don't quote it unless you can prove it. So make sure, don't be saying these things unless you can prove it.
Well, and sometimes, often you don't have to really say anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the words that do the healing. Mrs. Evans would remind us often that, if you see a person in error, if you see an error in a person, you see somebody doing something wrong or feeling something wrong or experiencing something wrong, it's not personal. You take the error and you put it on one side, you take the person and you put it on the person on another side. You see the person as God's perfect child, and you hate the error. You destroy the error, but it's never in the person. And that way, you don't get down into the mud, or you don't compromise your absolute standard.
Yes, and that is about our thinking, but also about our acting. I have learned sometimes in a hard way, unfortunately, but I'm trying to learn it metaphysically instead, that we cannot act with a person in the absolute when the person is not there at all, because it's just trouble.
No, we act with the greatest of compassion to meet the human need.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, the vital part, the heart and soul of Christian Science is love.
Thank you. Absolutely. That it's foolishness.
Right. And meeting the human need is acting in the absolute.
That's right.
Because you must be guided by God to know what the human need really is.
And how to meet it.
And how to meet it. Because oftentimes, what appears as a human want is not the human need.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The discernment of that.
I really thank you for saying that, because when you're with people and you're trying to do the right thing and think correctly, and maybe what they think they want is not really what they need, just the love.
Exactly. Only God can tell you what the need is.
Yeah.
And how to meet it.
You know, it often is true. What they're saying they need or want isn't really what they need or want at all. People who have children often can figure that out. You have to be quiet and listen to what is really going on and what the real problem is, and then God will give you the loving solution always.
And also, my point is that we can be thinking on the absolute. We can, through prayer, through listening to divine mind, see what the need is. But this person may not even be ready to want the good. And then we have to see that relative point where the person is at. That's my point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we meet them where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm. Not keep on thinking in the absolute, they are this, they are that, because that's not the reality of the moment in the relative. And then people will just take advantage of us, and they won't even understand what we are offering.
Mrs. Eddy said once that in talking to a person, she would always, yes, do that, see where they were coming from, and the person with that conversation, draw them in. And once she's drawn them in, then maybe she could expound more on metaphysical points. But you first meet them there. You don't just spouting the absolute, which is very wise of her, of course.
That's why I'm here. If the people from the church that I had met had done the super absolute to me, I would have run in the opposite direction.
Well, and this has to do with what you say, right? You meet them where they are.
Very important.
What you say. But what you do for them has to be directed by God. Whether they're ready for it or not, they will be blessed by it one way or the other. And yes, oftentimes the human mind will resist what is really needed.
Lawrence?
I think what people do feel too, what you're thinking. I feel that is important. What you think, not just what you say.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And you can say all the flowery words and not mean it in your heart, and they will know that. And you will end up rolling a stone against their heart, even though you were saying the proper thing, or sometimes even doing the proper thing. If it's not with love, it is a tinkling,
sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal.
Doesn't the Bible also say that your good will be evil spoken of? In other words, you're led to do something that needs to shake someone, maybe,
Right.
And to the human mind, that's like, you're a horrible person. But later they reflect on it and they realize that was just what they needed. And I think that's what we're really saying here is you just don't go approaching things humanly and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I think needs to be done. Because that's that's just an opinion. That's a belief. The other thing I was thinking too is that, honesty is spiritual power. So you can think, in the absolute all you want, but if you're not figuring out in your own life to live practically to this truth, then you're not really demonstrating spiritual power yourself. And that's where the scientists get into trouble. They spout the words, they read the book, but they're not living. It took me I've heard that before, but coming here, even when I first heard that, I was very confused by that. What does that mean? But that's been slowly revealed to me. You have to live practically these absolute truths in your life. And that's what brings the power to the situation that you're in with someone.
And people are watching, and as we've been taught here, that you might be the only sermon a person ever hears by your actions. But we need to move on now. We've spent a lot of time with this.
Can I just say this quote from Mary Baker Eddy that always drove me back to Christian Science? She said, "You have it as you live it." It's all about the practice. I love what the last person said, because that's all Christian Science. You have it as you live it, or forget it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right, the golden text, Jeremy.
Psalms. I esteem all thy precepts concerning all things to be right, and I hate every false way.
Now, this lesson is very much about discerning what's true and untrue, right? In Science and Health, the science of Christianity comes with fan in hand to separate the chaff from the wheat. Science will declare God aright, and Christianity will demonstrate this declaration and its divine principle, making man physically, morally, and spiritually. And then fan, separate a fable from fact, that which gives action to thought, which is what we've been talking about. And then firmament, spiritual understanding, the scientific line of demarcation between truth and error, between spirit and so-called matter. Now, this golden text says you need to hate every false way. And I used to wonder about that, because I thought we were supposed to be loving all the time. But the truth is, if you really love the truth, you will be repulsed. You will hate the wrong way. It will just, And this is a good thing, because that's how you can discern between what's real and unreal. And you can trust, if you're developing it and turning to God in all your ways, you can trust your spiritual sense. When something doesn't, you can smell a rat, so to speak. It's kind of what Tony was saying too.
And none of this is personal. And isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it is not. Yes, it is not that you hate a person.
Because we love all people. When we see someone doing something wrong, we hate what they're doing. We hate the false way. Out of love for them, we will do something about it.
Because they're a child of God.
Yes. Yes, thank you. In an article by Spurgeon that Carrie sent, and I have hated every false way. Love of the truth results in hatred for falsehood. He who values a robe despises the moth that would devour it. This godly man was not indifferent to anything in the moral and spiritual world, but what he didn't love, he hated. He was not lukewarm regarding the truth. He loved well and he hated well, but he was never a waverer. He knew what he felt and expressed it plainly. And then it says we don't want to be quarrelsome with people either. When you get quarrelsome, you've taken it personally. But when you see it the way it is, you can rebuke it without any hate in your heart, but only love in your heart.
I love Psalm 1. It says, don't walk in the way of scornful people that you feel are gonna be putting you down and pulling you down. Just get out of there and don't. It's beautiful how it steps through all the
Thank you very much.
things you shouldn't do.
Thank you. Yes. Psalm 1.
Psalm 1.
Beautiful.
And I love what you said about not hating, because I believe when the Bible talks about hate, it's because they haven't got yet to, those writers haven't got yet to really, really see what Christian Science teaches us. Truly, really, God is love, and so there should be any hate nowhere. And when we hate, we are going the wrong way, no matter what we hate, because God is love. We're not going with God. That's what I have learned in Christian Science.
Yes.
Yes, and Martha Wilcox says a wonderful thing about every person being the spiritual fact at hand. And so that is the same as seeing them as God's child. And so we can be knowing that. And when we're knowing that, we can know what the right thing is to say or do to handle the error that seems to be in our face. And like the prayer that Florence read, we can be in the midst of it and not be touched by it because we are above it. And we can know that they have that ability too. So it is kind of like living in two worlds, because you might be knowing one thing and then saying something that seems very relative. But it's just practice, right?
And it's really only one world.
It is one.
Yes.
Yeah.
The way you see it.
And this is how we bring heaven on earth. I love this. I was reading this week, also from Martha Wilcox, page 345. It's about Melchizedek. He subdued Egypt and overthrew their idolatry and did it without bloodshed or strife. How was this done? Through his understanding of God as one. He knew that materiality, personified evil, has no power to interfere or defeat that which is spiritual fact. I mean, to me, this is so powerful, especially right now. He defeated all their idolatry and false worship without any bloodshed or strife. And he did it in this way, knowing the spiritual fact. No matter how it was screaming and crying and wars or whatever was carrying on, it couldn't interfere with the spiritual fact. And in that knowing, it brought this to light. And this is what we as Christian scientists are to be doing. This is what our watches have been doing for a while now, and working with that article by Nancy Bouchon about, this is Eddie saying, the only way we can heal the world is by all of us knowing what?
God is all, and there is no evil.
Thank you. Exactly. And what came to me so strongly, I was last Sunday morning, was this statement from Science and Health, which also, because I found it very telling that Florence ended her readings on Wednesday night with this statement from Science and Health. And that is, in the quiet sanctuary of earnest longings, deny sin and plead God's allness. Every word of that is so beautiful. You get into that quiet sanctuary. And of what? Of earnest longings, a deep, deep, earnest longing in your heart for whatever it might be. And then to deny the sin that is presenting itself in your face. And then on your knees to God, plead his allness. Because sometimes it's not easy to see it or feel it. And you have to get where you're feeling it. And then you've done your work. But these are powerful statements that will bring in the millennium, will bring heaven to earth. And it must be done now. And then Gary found something very interesting in the Bliss Snap book about Gog and Magog.
Oh, yeah. Bliss Knapp was talking about how prophecy in the Bible has been fulfilled, with the first coming of Christ. Jesus was prophesied and he came, and the second coming of Christ, the Comforter, which is, we now know to be Christian Science, that has also come. And then he says, but there's one prophecy that has not yet been fulfilled. And he refers to as Ezekiel prophesying Gog and Magog. And Mrs. Eddy refers to Revelation saying that the great red dragon must come for a season. And he said, the thing that is about to come, and we're probably in the middle of it right now, is we need to handle deception. Because the great red dragon is nothing but a deceiver. But it's a very wily deceiver. And it is deceiving many, many people right now. But what Mary just referred to as our job as Christian Scientists, that is how we hold crime in check. Not being deceived, pleading the allness of God, and being aware of the deception that is trying to make itself real, make itself something that it is not.
And that is why you cannot hypnotize or mesmerize a truly working Christian Scientist. It's impossible, because all the time you are declaring I have the mind of Christ. So you cannot be hypnotized or deceived by this so-called dragon that's flailing around. Blissnap's father, in this book, The Destiny of the Mother Church, Blissnap says how his father would sit out in the yard under a great big, some kind of a linden tree or something, and study Revelation. And even though we have studied it many times in our Bible study, which has been vastly important, it's a good book to know. And the 7 churches of Revelation is so important because, we're church, and it tells you how all the ways of deception will get you off track. And I've mentioned that those DVDs, 2 of them.
Times of Fire.
Yeah, Times of Fire, and another one.
And it's sibling.
Yeah, and they're very good because they show you how it's trying to deceive the very elect. And we studied it too in our Bible studies, and we continue to study it. Just because we've studied it once, it's an everlasting kind of a unfoldment as the Bible is, as science and health is. So, but when you're aware of these things, they don't frighten you. You're not frightened by it because it's a deception, but you need to know it and you need to see how it's trying to work. So you are aware of it and you've got your armor on, and it can't deceive you in that way. So thank you. That was interesting I have to study Gog and Magog. Yeah, Gog and Magog. And, it is so important. And this understanding, this being able to discern the truth from error, this is why we get up in the morning and do the work that we do so conscientiously, first thing. Because as we've been taught here, our thought is like a sponge. So we start here, even before you get out of bed, with knowing that God is your mind, God is mind, God is my mind, God is the only pure and perfect mind. And then God is life, God is my life, God is the only pure and perfect life. Now, later on in the day, when you get thoughts of, my heart doesn't feel so good, or this, that, or I'm not thinking too clearly, I hear that too. Well, you know that God is your mind. So therefore, you know everything you need to know, and you cannot be mixed up, confused, or anything like that. And God is your life. So if the suggestion comes, you're not feeling well, or, you're whatever, you go back to that truth. You stay with it. And as I've said, I continue with that. God is sight, God is health, God is joy, God is strength. He's all those things. And you are declaring your oneness with him. And it's powerful. And you do it throughout the day. And then we do say the three things we've been taught here. I and my Father are one. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. And the Father hath not left me alone. Florence also had those in her readings Wednesday. Work with those during the day. You're always thinking something. Think the truth. And then I love, it's in Joshua. Choose ye this day whom ye will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Ask yourself when these suggestions come that you don't have enough money. Who are you going to serve today? Are you going to serve that voice telling you that? Or are you going to serve the one God Almighty that says, I am your supply, all that I have is yours, you are my beloved child? Think about who you're going to serve. In this way, you are staying in reality. And it's most important. So after we do that, then we go to the 3 daily duties, which is why we have them all over our full text to remind you. And sometime, I don't think it'll be today, but sometime we're going to go through each one because I'm telling you they are a total treatment for your day. And you don't say these things flying through it all like your rosary beads. You think about it. You say it with understanding in your thought. What does it mean? How does this apply to me? And I go through, the 91st Psalm, the 23rd Psalm, and certainly the Lord's Prayer, scientific statement of being. And if you tell me you don't have time, I tell you, you make time.
You don't have time not to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like you guys always say, and it's just so true, to talk to God like he is your best friend. He is your father. He is your mother. He's everything. And that goes along with that feeling that you were just talking about, Mary, that is the spirit as opposed to the letter. And it's just so crucial, and it's so awesome when you're making that connection with God.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And how does Mrs. Eddy start her textbook? What's the
those leaning on the sustaining infinite, today is big with blessings.
Exactly.
Oh no, the time for thinkers. I don't know which one.
No.
Right.
No, you're right the first.
The first is right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah, one of
My
our
dad always said big with blessings. That's what he would say to me. Big, really emphasized that word.
Yeah, and one of our, readers that reads a lesson during the week, she says that at the very end.
She did, yes.
And it's very good to be reminded, leaning on God. And in the things, I listen sometimes while I'm doing other things, but I listen to things to handle daily. One of them, the first thing I do in the morning, Mrs. Eddy, when I awake, is declare I shall have no other mind before the divine mind and become fully conscious of this, and then adhere to it throughout the entire day. And then evil cannot touch me. And then the first thing in the morning, call on God to deliver you from temptation and help you to be awake. Then do your chores, not as a dreamy hashish eater, but with a clear sense of what to do and just how to do it. Then sit down and first get yourself into a consciousness of your power with God. And then take up the outside watch. Sit until this is clear, if 2 hours. And that outside watch is this whole business of the materiality, the world. And you do it until you plead God's allness till you feel it. You feel it, and then you go forth in your day leaning on the sustaining infinite, yes. And it will be big with blessings. It will probably be big with problems too. But when you're in this state of thought, they will turn into blessings. And
Yeah,
then
you're up to it.
you're up to it.
Nicely, God will fill in the details in the while you're praying.
He will fill in the details. Thank you. And then again, I want you to take up the watch every 2 hours, as long as you live. Hey, folks, this is Mrs. Eddy. Or until you can make the right side real to your consciousness. Because if you're just saying the words and you're not feeling it, then you haven't done it. You've got to feel it. And this is why I say, so during the day, you feel sick, you feel poor, you feel upset, you feel depressed. Not if you start with this feel stuff, you go back, the only thing you can feel is your oneness with God. So you come back to that and plead his allness until you feel it. And your day will be filled with reality. I love this. Go ahead. Lawrence, do you want to? Or something?
No, I wasn't saying.
Anyone? I love this. Something that.
All that. Very important. Thank you so much.
Welcome. This was in an article. It was called The Art of Slow Living. It wasn't a Christian Science article, but I love what it said. It says, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. It's a Chinese philosopher. And just look out your window. Think of what is accomplished in nature. I mean, we see it now with autumn coming, and our folks in Australia see it with spring coming. But we see it, and it's never rushed. It couldn't be rushed. Sorry, the stately goings of mind. And that's how you start your morning. You do not feel rushed, pushed, never. I saw, this was also an amusing article about things that will ruin your day. And you know what was on top of that list was get out of bed and check your phone.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, that temptation, I mean, even for me, because I think, oh, did I get an important email or text? I better look. All you have to do is look once, and then the flood of other things. That's interesting. Look what's going on in the world. And pretty soon you've wasted a bunch of time listening to other people's opinions or problems that you've got to sort out yourself. So no, you go straight to what we just talked about. All of these truths, and not just by rote, but deep within your heart. And honestly, it does not necessarily take any huge amount of time. I have spent more time on my stupid phone or computer than I have doing this. And we talk about doing it often, going back to it, even every hour. Make sure you're feeling the allness of God, and you're not being deceived by the unreal pictures. So.
Oh, I just wanted to say, and don't look at your phone before coming to a service either.
No.
Oh my gosh, no. And here we were taught, Mrs. Evans gave us this, and she said, do it first thing in the morning, all these things, or you're cooked. It's too late. If you want to do it on your lunch break, forget it. Your mind's swirling around with everything else that's going on. Got to do this first. And in Big Del Young, which I've given recently, but I loved it in the 3 Rules for Treatment, he says, this is a summary, clear up the thought right away in the morning. Think, as I go on my way rejoicing in the Lord, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. I love that. Think as you go about your day now. You've done all your things, so I'm going to go about my day rejoicing, leaning on the sustaining infinite, and I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And then Mrs. Eddy left science and health for us to amplify. Take and amplify one statement of the textbook daily and study it in a big, progressive way. Ponder it. I mean, that's what happened to in the quiet sanctuary of earnest longings. Just one statement like that. It's powerful. And then it says, you cannot study it today as you did yesterday because more has been revealed. The utterance of God is man. Be normal, be peaceful, be sure, and let the one mind operate. So it's so important. And again, another thing we were taught here, take a statement from the lesson, jot it down, anything you want, Bible or Science and Health, put it on a little piece of paper and keep it with you and work with it during the day if error tries to knock on your door. This is your armor. And in doing this, you're not only blessing yourself, you are blessing the whole world. This is getting the Bible and Science and Health out in the airwaves, as I say, pulsating out every which way to nullify all the false beliefs of mortal mind. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is. So don't tell me you can't do it, don't want to do it, don't have time to do it. Forget that. I don't want to hear that. That's just a bunch of you know what. And we are being called on, you either do it or you're going to be held accountable for not doing it. And in doing it, tremendous things can be done, and we will change the course of history.
I love the statement in the lesson this week from Jeremiah where it's talking about the Lord. He hath made the earth by his power. He hath established the world by his wisdom and stretched out the heavens by his discretion. I kept thinking about that with the storm, trying to say that it could stretch out and do, but no.
Yes.
God stretched out the heavens.
Thank you.
I love to have found these little things to put in.
Very powerful. And that's exactly, take something like that and work with it. Then when they're talking about these storms, you annul that. No, the face of God is all we can see, feel, hear, experience. And the point being to do it always. You don't wait till some major disaster, but you keep at it. And I know the Weather Committee does.
Yes, no.
As we all should. And we have a very large Weather Committee too.
Yeah, so
And it's also with the situation, what you just said about weather, it's also with war, because to handle that immediately and can't put it off or do something, we have to know that has no part in God's idea, and no one is a part of that. We only are all united in the peace of God. We can't correct an error that doesn't exist. So we have to realize that, and instead of making it into a reality and then trying to correct it.
Thank you very much. All these things. And remember, when we seem to see all these things, it is the Adam dream. It's the Adam dream. And we must all be watchtowers wherever we are, and it will try to be in your face. And of course, TV and news does a wonderful job of, pounding it on you, and they'll play one scene over and over, the worst scene in the world over and over and over, and to mesmerize you. And it is the red dragon walking to and fro. So shields up, heads down. We don't have to be part of that. We stay in the kingdom of heaven. And even, many of us have been in the middle of some pretty bad things, but even there you can experience peace and joy and power. I heard about it this week from some of our members who were in that North Carolina area, and they were seeing and experiencing. They said, in fact, one of them said it was so wonderful because their electricity's off, so they can't watch the news, so they look at the stars at night and they feel so much better. I said, well, that's great.
Stay with that.
Stay with that, yes. And neighbor helping neighbor, so much love being expressed.
Yeah.
And that beautiful watch we had last night, Linda found that beautiful statement from Mrs. Eddy about our universal love.
And oftentimes in these sort of moments is when people's faith in humanity is restored.
Yeah,
it is. It is, and it shocks people out of their complacency and turns them wholeheartedly to God. But let's not get into that situation before we do it. Let's just do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Not only for ourselves.
Right.
Hera doesn't know how to do anything but keep repeating and repeating and pounding and pounding.
Yep, the same old era, and it's not what the watching point brought up. So, and in a beautiful article Carrie sent me, we think it's by Judge Hannah, and it's on our lesson sermons, because the lesson sermons, so I read it on at our membership meeting. Mrs. Eddy said it was the most important thing there is, really, because we are all working together in unity with the Bible and science and health all week long, and it's very, very powerful, those certain statements to be working with. And in this article, it says the Christian Science pulpits are now teaching, and this was written in 1899, of God in God's way. The sermons from Sunday to Sunday in these pulpits are, quote, undivorced from truth, uncontaminated and unfettered by human hypotheses, and authorized by Christ.
Mm-hmm.
All right. People have asked me about that. That's how it was in 1899. That's how it was written when Mrs. Eddy was here. It was changed afterwards. I don't even remember now what it was changed to, but
Finally authorized.
This is authorized by Christ. It seems to have a bit more clout to it.
It does.
Yeah. That's right.
The accountability on you to prove it.
Yeah.
True. Thank you. The Bible and Science and Health, again, quote, the Bible and the Christian Science textbook are our only preachers. And one of the great things about it is this keeps us knowing reality from unreality, right? We can't get mixed up by human opinions. We're getting the truth. We always go back to the truth. What does the Bible say? What does Mrs. Eddy say? And Mrs. Eddy says, study the Bible daily, dear ones. It's another in the things to do every day. Study it daily. And this goes on to say, the subject for these sermons, as is quite known, were furnished by our leader. These subjects cover the essentials of Christianity. As these discourses are made up wholly of passages from the Bible and the Christian Science textbook, they contain nothing of human opinion. They are devoid of man-made theories. They have no guesses at the future, no conjectures regarding the past, and no rudimentary exhortations about the present. They are free from sensationalism, and they make no effort to please the fancy or foster the pride of mortals. The gospel preached from our pulpits is not after man, neither was it taught of man, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. These sermons contain the word of God unmixed with human error. They voice the eternal fact concerning the everlasting truth. They set forth the realities of being. They inform, instruct, and enlighten concerning the verities of God and man. Made me so grateful for our lessons. And here again, how to discern fact from fable. Our lessons, our textbook, the Bible, prose works. Always, you can go back there and check it out, and you will not be led astray. And this will help us in discerning reality. And the lesson brings out too in Genesis that in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and he said, let there be light. And what does light represent?
Understanding.
Yeah. Yes. He gives us understanding to understand this science. So don't say you don't get it, it's too hard, or we don't need to read Science and Health anymore. No. Or it's too difficult. He gives us the understanding. All you have to do is want to with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and you'll get it. And it will be wonderful. A revelation. So
I know you have the right mind.
Yes, exactly. Because you have that deep understanding, you have the right mind. You can't be fooled. Eric can't try to trick you. You
Or
will,
it may try, but it won't succeed.
it won't succeed. You've got your armor on.
Could I tell a story about the little boy? He was 7 years old. He had an earache or something. He got the light on, science and health. His father said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm reading science and health." Earache went away, went to bed.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, it's beautiful. And so this is what we do. Take up our textbook. Mrs. Eddy says there's healing in our textbook, and we all know that to be true. So we're going to end today on an article by Mrs. Evans
Entitled
Choices.
Choices. She writes, "We all make choices. Moment by moment, day by day, we make choices. We get up in the morning and we choose to have either a happy day or a miserable day. If we start the day with God and with the study of the lesson sermon, we're choosing peace and dominion. If we rush out without prayer and study, unprepared to meet the world, we have chosen to be tossed about on the turbulent sea of error. The Plainfield lesson sermons are always so fresh and healing. They never grow stale. We make the choice, deciding I'm going to read the lesson this morning before my day starts, and I'm going to listen to God while I read it. I'm not going to rush through it and be robbed of the comforting, healing message God has prepared for me. I'm going to read it quietly and hear what God has to say to me. I will make this choice actively to commune with my Maker first thing in the morning. As the day goes on, perhaps we're confronted with someone who seems to be a difficult mortal. We have to make a choice. We can get mad and blow our top, breaking our connection with God, and thereby becoming mentally unstable and miserable. Or we can handle the situation from the standpoint of dominion, refusing to be disturbed, and making sure that everything we say and do is principled and will bless. We make the choice. If the choice is for God, it is going to bring peace and blessing to everyone we deal with. If not, life can be chaotic and unrewarding. As our leader says in Science and Health, quote, man's moral mercury, rising or falling, registers his healing ability and fitness to teach, end quote. That's page 449. God has given us the ability to stay steady and unmoved before the unreal, but sometimes aggressive claims of error. The world needs our clear, calm, Christly thinking now as it never has before. Choices. Moment by moment, we make them. From the minute we open our eyes in the morning until the time we retire at night, we make choices. Right choices bring abundance. They bring health and peace, the peace of God which passeth all understanding. It's so foolish to let error make our choices for us. We can make them with God and win. That's what Christian Science is all about, the freedom to make the right choices. In doing this, we are departing daily from error and walking steadfastly into the kingdom of heaven. Choices. God has given us the power to make them, and thank God we can make them right. Hymn number 382 assures us of our ability to walk with God and make the right choices. Quote, take then the sacred rod, thou art not error's thrall. Thou hast the gift of God, dominion over all. End quote.
Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.